On this video, I'd like to perform some localized changes. I'm going to go ahead and start in Bridge. What you'll notice is on these two particular images that I've selected, that there's going to be slider icon on the top of both, which identifies that I've already made basic corrections, basic global corrections for these particular images. I'm now going to launch these into Camera Raw or use the quick key command of Command R or Control R on a PC. That's going to launch them both into Adobe Camera Raw. What I'd like to note is that both are on the bottom here. And they've got the basic settings, so I went ahead and used the auto settings. Generally, auto is just a really good way to go in terms of gaining control of your images. Once you've had an opportunity to do that, I recommend that you spend more time in the global changes for your particular images. On this one, I would like to deal with the radial filter in the brush tool. Let's go ahead and start with the brush tool. You're going to notice the adjustment brush up here as I hover over it. You get, as in the hover, you get the little dialog box that with the adjustment brush, it's going to be the letter K. So if I select on the letter K, which is the quick key command, it's going to put me into that particular selective edits. So what I want to do is I want to focus on this kind of central area right here and darken that to work with my overall global settings. The area is too bright and I want to bring it down in terms of darkening that particular area. So it's a selective localized change going from the global to the local, from the overall image to a small area within that image. So within here, I want to note a few things. You've got all your settings here. I'm going to be adding a new change. So this is going to be a new adjustment. So if you're working and doing multiple adjustments within a tool, you'll select on that if you want to create a new one. In terms of size, you can use the bracket keys. Will help you enlarge and reduce. On top of that, I would like to kind of go through this whole panel right here and identify some of the different changes. So I want it feathered quite a bit, so that's going to be as I hover over the image. And it's a little hard to see, but it's going to be that transition from the inner circle to the outer circle. And that's going to be your feather. The flow is going to be how much, and the density. The flow is going to be how much that you're putting on, so I'm going to keep that at approximately 30. The density is once again how much is going on at one particular time. And I want to make sure that the auto mask feature is set so it can identify the difference between two different areas so it doesn't affect an area. So if it can determine that, it won't be affecting that area. And it'll just be selecting the highlights in this particular case. So next, once I've got that set, I'm just going to go and close that up. I can go ahead and select mask options that will help you see what I'm actually doing here. The next change I'm going to be going to is exposure. Exposure is going to be controlling the overall brightness and darkness of the image. And then we can get more into the quarter tones and 3/4 tones of highlights and shadows. And then the whites and blacks, which are to the far edge of the histogram once again. They're going to be this edge up here and the far edge up here. We're going to be focusing on exposure for the time being, darkening this area in the center. And let's go ahead and give it a little bit more of, I can see right here, it's probably, I'm trying to guess the tone. I would say it's probably going to be in the highlights as well. So I'll bring those down as at the same time. So I want to reduce this down. I'm going to be using the quick key commands of the brackets. And I'm going to reduce that down so I'm working on just the area that I want to focus on, which is just his face. And then what I'm doing here, you notice it goes pink. That just shows you that I'm affecting the area around him. We'll get into that in just one second, what that's doing. I'm just painting him in just a little bit. You can see you've got a little bleed into the background here and back here, but you don't have it up here. So it determined that there was an edge, and that's where the auto adjust comes into effect. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mask options. That's what's making it pink at this particular, with this particular image. We can see how this is affecting it. So you can see that this change is pretty heavy at this particular point. He's darker than the background. and I probably want to change that. So if I want to go ahead and change that particular setting, I can just go ahead and brighten that up, and I'll just go ahead and reduce the amount of highlights that we have changed. And now I want to go through, I'll just use the letter P to cycle through the visual states. So P is before, and I press P again. So that's the letter P, giving me the before and the after. So let's just say I noticed that I wanted to change something else with this radial filter. I would go up to the plus mark here, and this is going to create a new one. You can see that I accidentally created one up here. And if you select one and you don't want it any longer, you can go ahead and select on it. It's activated. Now it's deleted and gone. If I want to reactivate this one and come work on it again, let's just say I want to add a little contrast. I just want to make sure that I've got a red selection point on where I set that initially. And now let's just say I want to make another setting in the background. I'm going to go ahead, and now it's ready for me to make an adjustment. I'm just going to increase the size. You can see there, I just want to show you the radial filter. And I want to just go in and just paint in a little bit of the background here. And let's just say I want to darken this just a touch. And then once again, just to show you what I've done, I've selected that, and it shows that I've made some effective changes to that area. I'll unselect that. And what I want you to note is way up here, you'll notice that little red dot. And when I switch back, and that means it's activated, this one is not activated. I'll select on this, and you notice the one at the very top goes white. So this movie covers the radial filter. And then once again, if you want to change the way that this brush is affecting the images that you're working on in terms of localized correction, I recommend you change the size, the feather. So if I have a really sharp edge, I want to turn down the feather, and also bring down the flow and density. I generally had it up really high for this particular image, and I don't really need it that much, but I'm thinking somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 is a really great place to put my flow and density, which is just how much of the different changes is going to be affecting as I paint it in with the Radial tool.